How is it going, guys? Winner Kills here, and welcome back to a brand new deck profile. Of course, if you guys like that opening cinematic, please drop a like for that, and also consider sharing with a friend if you want to. But today I got an updated Satellarknight deck profile for you guys. We've gotten a little bit of support recently. I haven't done an update for this deck in a long time, but I really haven't felt a reason to do so. But now I'm more compelled so than ever because Master Rule 5 mainly in this deck really isn't restricted by link zones anymore. Like, I think that was probably one of its biggest restrictions. I mean, that and maybe a lack of extenders, a severe lack of extenders. But nonetheless, very excited to bring you guys an update for the month of April 2020. If you guys want to see like a test hand video, I mean, I don't know how interesting a test hand video would be for this deck. But yeah, I don't know, maybe at some point in the future. But regardless, we're going to go ahead and get into the profile here. But first, I want to mention a quick shout out to our sponsor over at Imperium Duelist, provider of this amazing two-player cloth playmat you guys see me using here. I love the color scheme on this, the grayish black with the blue lining down here in the different colors. You got the yellow fading into the red and blue here. Very, very nice. So if you guys want to get this mat or any of these sleeves or their new deck box, that's all available on their website right now, and you can use it, that discount code in the description. Winner Kills 10 off to get 10% off your entire order. Helps support the channel, helps save you guys a little money in the process. And of course, if you guys are buying anything on TCG Player, do not forget to use that affiliate link, as I will get a small bit back from the revenue of your purchase. So it does help to support the channel greatly. And lastly, consider hitting that join button to get access to some exclusive perks and rewards, like behind the scenes stuff, photos of you know, in the community posts of upcoming videos I'm working on, you know, bloopers and outtakes, and of course a dedicated spot for your name in the credits of all my videos. But let's go ahead and get into the profile here. We've got 3 Satellarknight Deneb, we have 3 Satellarknight Altair, 3 Satellarknight Homunculi, a pretty standard run-of-the-mill lineup here, and 2 Satellarknight Vega. But that's not it for the monsters. We also have 2 copies of Nibiru the Primal Being and 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Of course, we are going first deck, but we're not always going to be able to go first. Now we'll go into the spells. We have 2 Satellarknight Skybridge, 2 copies of Pot of Desires, 2 copies of Pot of Duality, 1 reinforcement of the army, and the last spell, who could forget, 1 copy of the Upstart Goblin. So now we're going to go into the traps, which is mainly the bulk of the deck. 3 Stellar Nova Alpha. Then we also have 3 copies of Solemn Strike, 3 copies of Call of the Haunted. Then we have 2 copies of Compulsory Evacuation Device, 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance, and that rounds out the 40-card main deck, 39 cards, technically, if you want to look at Upstart Goblin in that way. But now we'll go into the extra deck here, and we'll start with our Xyz monsters, which make up a large majority of the extra deck. We have 3 Stellarknight Triverer, basically your main go-to boss monster within the extra deck. 1 Stellarknight Constellar Diamond, 1 Stellarknight Delta Rose, 2 Dark Tellarknight Battlemias, 1 number S39 Utopia the Lightning, 1 number 39 Utopia, 1 Evil Swarm Exciton Knight, 1 Daigusto Emerald, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 Tornado Dragon, 1 Bujinki Ahashima, and 1 Gravity Controller. And that rounds out the extra deck. Now we'll go ahead and do the breakdown of the deck. Alright, so I have the deck built again this time around, just like the previous profile we did, but this time we're going to go through it a bit differently. Basically, have the deck organized based on card rolls, starters, extenders, and defensive cards, and things like that. So we'll go ahead and start again here with the 3 copies of Satellarknight Deneb. Of course, this card is a starter card mainly because it helps get our engine going. It helps us search another Tellarknight monster and add it to our hand, which will allow us to set up for our next turn, because this deck has a very slow play style. We want to use Deneb to search a card like Altair or Vega to have a follow-up play for next turn. So this card is really fantastic at doing that, basically one of your prime normal summons. Then also another starter card here we have the 3 Satellarknight Homunculi, or Homunculi. Basically, just as good as a normal summon as Deneb is, because Homunculi can foolish the Deneb to the graveyard. It can send any Tellarknight card to the graveyard, but sending Deneb is best because, again, this deck has a very slow play style, and we want to set up cards like Call the Haunted in the graveyard, and Homunculi does that best to be able to spring that Deneb onto our field during our opponent's turn to add Altair or Vega to be able to have a much more powerful play for the next turn. It's all about surviving the early game with this deck and getting everything set up, and Deneb and Nanook help us do just that. Now, we do have 2 copies of Pot of Desires. I'm labeling this here as a starter card primarily because we need to see cards. We need to see Satellarknight cards to be able to make our board function. Most importantly, we need to see trap cards because, again, this deck does have a slow setup, and we need to be able to survive that early game as best we can, and Desires will help us do that. Same thing can be said about Pot of Duality, helping us dig into key starter cards and more defensive cards. And then last not least, our last starter card we have here is, of course, Reinforcement of the Army, because this can get us either Deneb or Nuk, whichever card we favor in that particular situation. Now moving on to the superior extenders, we have 3 copies of Satellarknight Altair. This card is fantastic because it revives the Satellarknight from the graveyard when normal or special summoned. So again, what I was talking about with the starter cards with the Neb and a Nuk, we want those cards to set up plays that we have for next turn, and you're usually trying to set up an Altair play because Altair can revive Deneb, and Deneb can add another card again, and then you can go into a rank 4 play, which is basically the heart and soul of this deck, is making rank 4 plays. Some of your best monsters exist within the extra deck, cards like Deltarose and Travere. Some of the best cards, hands down, and you use a lot of the chain summoning effects of, Altair, Vega, and Deneb and things like that to be able to make these monsters very easily. So hands down, you got to label Altair as a superior extender because, turn 1, you're not going to have, a card engraved for him to be able to revive. So sometimes he can be a dead normal summon. Then we have 2 Vega. Vega, arguably a bit more of a superior extender. I guess you could label Altair more of an additional extender. But Vega is great because it can get one out of your hand and can help make the Bujin Link turn 1, which can set up some kind of cool plays. And this card is just a little bit better than Altair because you're more likely to have another Satellarknight in your hand than one in your grave turn 1. So I do like Vega a bit more for that. But I think playing 2 is just fine. I mainly want to play 3 Altair basically for the grind game. Then we have 2 copies of Skybridge. This card is great because it can help dodge hand traps. Mainly things like Impermanence and Effect Valor. But it can basically turn any, not so optimal Tellarknight in our opening hand into an optimal one. Basically, we can shuffle the Altair or the Vega back into the deck to get a Nuclei or Deneb to have a much better setup. So I like the Skybridge for that. So that is it for the superior extenders. As I mentioned earlier, this deck does have a severe lack of extenders, but is more so of a control deck, a beatdown deck, if you were trying to lower our opponent's ceiling that below ours, so we can win the game. Our additional extenders here consist of 3 Call by the Grave. Again, you could consider Altair a additional extender, but this trap really does a whole lot for the deck. We can basically use it to revive Altair or Vega or Deneb during our opponent's turn to help do these big chain summons, using like Call the Haunted to revive Altair. Altair revives Vega. Vega summons the Deneb from him. You get a Search of Altair for next turn, and sort of the cycle continues. And it's also a continuous trap, which is pretty advantageous to our strategy. That's why I do play a lot of continuous traps, or at least try to have an emphasis on continuous traps with this deck, because we can use that Satellarknight Travere to bounce all cards on the field back to the hand, these cards included, in order for us to reuse on following turns. So that is it for the additional extenders. Again, not many extenders within this deck. But now we're going to go into the Chainable Defense, which are basically defensive cards that exist in the realm of cards that don't have to be activated within a certain window. We can activate these cards whenever we want. Of course, Impermanence can negate monster effects, but we don't have to activate Impermanence when the monster effect is activated. So basically just the role of what Chainable Defense is. We can activate these cards at any point in the game state, not in response to one particular situation. But I like Impermanence because, again, this deck is a very much die-hard going for strategy. So that's why you saw me in the early profile playing cards like Nibiru and Ash. But I also play Impermanence because this card serves the dual purpose of being able to, interact with our opponent turn 1, but also be a pretty good card to set going first. Then we have Anti-Spell Fragrance, a chainable defensive card. Again, this card does not have to be activated when the opponent plays a spell, but this can help slow our opponent's turns down quite a bit. Anti-Spell across the board is a great card, much like Imperial Order is, but I didn't want to just play the one order because I'd rather have a better chance of seeing triple Fragrance as opposed to just the one order. And Fragrance doesn't hurt us as much as the order does, because we do have some spells that we'd like to activate at some point during the game, like Rhoda or Desires or Duality, whatever it may be. So this sort of helps to slow our opponent's, pacing down to that of ours, so we can sort of compete with them. So Fragrance is just nice, though. Then we have 2 Compulse. This card can be really activated at any point in the game. Doesn't have to have a certain requirement met, and it's also just amazing bouncing problem cards back to the deck. Ideally, these would probably be maybe 2 copies of Get Out, because, you know, with Master Rule 5 being a thing, more people are going to be going into the extra deck more often. Multiple extra deck monsters and Get Out might give you a little bit more bang for your buck, but a Compulse nonetheless is still a great option. Now we're going to go to the Chain or the Responsive Defense, which are basically cards that have to be activated within a certain window of a part of the game, a certain event that's happening. 2 of those cards being Nibiru, the Primal Being. This card is just insane. This deck can lose outright to combo decks, so having a card like Nibiru within the main deck is a no-brainer. Ash Blossom, again, simply just giving ourselves a chance at having a say at what our opponent is doing during that turn. Now, I've seen some people play like going second builds of Satellarknight, playing like evenly matched and super poly, but that's not the way I really enjoy playing Satellarknight. So I like to have a little bit of hand traps within the main deck to help us in case we do lose die roll and we do have to go second. We do have some cards in the main deck to help combat those build-a-board decks. Then we have 3 Stellar Nova Alpha. This has been a mainstay in Satellarknight since its inception. It's one of the best counter traps for the deck to be able to be played. Unfortunately, this does require you, though, to have a Satellarknight monster face-up on the field. Basically, when your opponent activates a spell, trap, or monster effect, you can send one face-up Satellarknight monster control to the graveyard. Negate the activation, you destroy that, then draw 1 card. So this card basically allows you to tribute off a tower, negate an effect, and then draw an additional card if that card was destroyed upon the activation that we negated. So really like this card. Then we have 3 Solemn Strike. This card could be Solemn Judgment now that it's at 3. So you could consider those being interchangeable. I think Judgment might be a little bit better, but it really depends on the deck we're playing against. But I really do like Strike, and I would probably swap, like I said, maybe the Judgments that I would currently side in this deck for the Strikes. I think Judgment's a bit better if you do have to go first, but Strike can help break boards if you do have to go second. And then the last card we're going to talk about is the Engine Requirement. Not the Engine Requirement, the Placeholder card. Upstart Goblin solely existing to drop the deck count below 40. That's it for the main deck breakdown. Now we'll take a look at the extra deck. So now we're going to take a quick brief look at the extra deck, starting with the Link Monsters. We have our Bujinki and our Gravity Controller. Gravity Controller has been a card I've been eyeing to put in this extra deck for a long time, mainly because you can make Trevere and then, you know, bounce everything back, take a card out of the hand, and then link off the Trevere into this. Get Trevere's effect to summon one from the graveyard, I believe, or from the deck. Yeah, summon a Satellarknight from the graveyard, and you can sort of start to combo again off of that, and Gravity Controller is just a great card in its own. And the Bujinki is a card that I'm just trying out. This is something you don't have to play. In theory, this could just be like another, it could be like Castel, it could be the Isolde. But this card is cool because it allows you to make some cool plays if you open Vega, and like, you know, 2 other Satellarknights, I suppose. So this card is interesting. It is a light monster. It does have a nice effect where basically if an Xyz monster activates an effect by detaching material, you can destroy a spell or trap. That's really nice, so it can help us in more back row heavy matchups. But I think this card fits okay in here. Like I said, if you don't want to play it, you could easily play something like Castel in place of it. Tornado Dragon here just for more back row removal. This deck does kind of have a harder time against more back row heavy decks. Utopia package allows us to easily go for a game when we otherwise could not. And then we have more floodgates within the main deck like Dweller. Exciton Knight is a fantastic card to have as a comeback play. That's the main reason that I'm opting to play it. Daigusto Emerald, fantastic for recycling resources. Although arguably one of the weaker cards in the extra deck, since you don't really always make it, you'd always rather be making Triver if possible, but sometimes late game you do need the ability to recycle your resources, and Daigusto Emerald is the card that will allow you to do that. And the last 3 cards we have here in the extra deck are all just basically engine cards. Bat Lamias basically allows you to get into Triver using just 2 materials. So that's the main reason I play him, is because getting into Triver is just so important. That's the main reason we play 3 Triver. This card is the heart and soul of the deck. You summon it, all cards get bounced back on the field, so it removes a whole slew of cards that you wouldn't be able to deal with Deltaros otherwise, and it can detach to take a card out of your opponent's hand too, which is nice, and also resets all of our continuous trap cards like Call the Haunted, and Anti-Spell Fragments. Could also reset something like Imperial Order or Fiendish Chain, whatever cards you're opting to play. Deltaros is nice just to have as an option for some built-in spot removal, and Diamond is a very nice floodgate against dark decks to have within the extra deck, so I think this card is 100% mandatory to have at least 1 copy of in the extra deck. So that's it for the extra deck. Brief rundown, and now we're going to go ahead and talk about side decking. So right now I'm going to put up a mock side deck that I would use for this deck on from YGO Pro. But things that you could side out easily would be swapping out cards like Solemn Strike for Solemn Judgment if you know for a fact you're going to be going first. And same thing can be said if we do know we are going to be going first. The cards like Nibiru could easily be sided out for more traps. Yeah, so you could easily put those in. You could easily put in like the artifact package, which is something I think would be a pretty good idea to put into this deck, especially if you do know you're going to be going first. And Ice Spell easily could be sided out for something like Heavy Storm Duster, when we're playing against more of a back row heavy deck that really isn't relying too much on traps, or spells rather. So Anti Spell could easily get sided out. But other than that, I really wouldn't side anything else out. Maybe you could get away with one Duality, but or one Skybridge for some more hand traps, whatever it may be. Or siding in cards like Waking the Dragon, because that card could be pretty sneaky in this deck. People are going to be siding in back row hate against us very, very easily. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much going to do it for the profile. Those are the cards that I would side out. We have plenty of room to side things in this deck, which is nice. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Leave your questions or comments down below in the comment section. And, yeah, let me know what you guys think about this deck. And let me know what deck you guys are excited to play this format, I guess. And yeah, like I said, consider hitting that join button down below to become a member of the channel. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, WinterKills sign out. We'll see you guys in the next one.